In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now, with today's guest, your host, Chris Bear.
Going to start the recording. He cuts and splices so I don't shut the recording off, and in between the breaks we can sit and visit, yada yada yada. Then he goes in and cuts and pastes and does all of his magic shit, whatever he does with it. So there's that too. So anyways, I'll do all the intros and the outros coming into every segment, and we'll just kind of go from there. All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Bear, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. We appreciate you joining us. Not only are we on WNX Radio on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock Central Time, but if you miss one of our episodes, you can join us on Apple, Spotify, and now on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel at Legacy of Agriculture and join us there. Today, my guest is Troy Johnsrud from Fergus Falls, Minnesota. Troy, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. You've had your hands full the last 60 days.
Good morning. Yes, thank you, Chris. Yes.
You guys just got done having a very, very successful auction with Piper Auction Realty. Tell us just a little bit about your auction that you had in Fergus Falls.
Yeah, December 17th, we had a great turnout up here. We had a very full line of tractors, combines, tillage equipment, trucks, various parts, shop equipment, tools. Had an excellent turnout. Had a indoor auction, live auction that went very well. We couldn't have been happier with the turnout. We don't know exactly, probably over 400 attendees in person. Outside of the online bidding. So yeah, it went very well, very well.
Before we get in, I would like to get into that auction just a little bit and the logistics of that auction. But before we get into it, more exciting, and I think more important than that, is that you're now joining us as part of the Piper's team. You're based out of Fergus Falls. Tell us a little bit about your background and who you are and how you've been related to agriculture all your life.
Sure, yes. I actually live just outside of Elbow Lake, Minnesota, which is just next to Fergus Falls. We, West Central Minnesota, been a lifelong resident of West Central Minnesota. Grew up, was born in Starbuck, Minnesota on my parents' dairy farm. My parents ran a small dairy farm until I was very young when they retired from that, but grew up in the farming community where that's kind of what you did. We started, everything I did was around farms my whole life. So not so much the cattle or livestock industry, but the grain farming, wheat and soybeans. We were on the edge of sugar beet country. I started working on farms when I was a young teenager, like everyone did in this area, and I just grew up around it. Spent a lot of time in my youth on custom harvesting. Started selling farm equipment 25 years ago. Just been around it. When you're from here, that's generally what you do. So it's my love, it's my passion, it's what I know best, and that's what I'm comfortable with. So. Other than a few years outside of college, I lived in Southern California and in Houston, Texas. I've been in this area working with farms and agriculture my whole life.
Those of us that were raised on the seat of a tractor, what's some of your fondest memories of farming as a young man or as a child?
Some of my probably the memories that give you the most passion, maybe that's what passion comes from, I don't know, but riding in the tractors with my dad when I was young. Old Series 2 Cougar Steiger tractor or a Series 3 Panther, sitting on those of them been around those tractors know the little makeshift bench next to the driver's seat. I spent hours in those tractors going back and forth, and it just drove my passion for Steiger tractors, 4-wheel drive, big horsepower tractors, and of course my interest in the equipment. But those memories of sitting in that tractor for hours, I would be so mad when Mom would come get me, or I had to leave, or I couldn't go. Those were some of the best memories. And then, as my father retired from the dairy farm, I would still visit a lot of dairy farms. My cousins, uncles, the whole family, everybody was dairy farmers. So being in the barns early in the morning, and the sights and the smells and all those things, the fresh cut hay and stuff, it just never leaves you.
I did an LOA with Ben Tilburg clear back last summer, who is also a Pfeiffer's member out in Wisconsin. And I got a kick out of him. One of his favorite memories was going with his grandfather. His grandfather sold dairy components, equipment to dairymen, and they would always go early in the morning because nothing had gone wrong yet, and the dairyman was easier to get along with in the wee hours of the morning than they were later in the day because nothing had gone wrong yet in the morning. So kind of falls into the same thing. But I'm a little bit like you. I was born on the seat of a tractor, and I can remember sitting and riding in the combine with my dad, and I was raised on a wheat potato farm, and I can remember as a kid, all of that wheat was disappearing into the head and then going to the combine. You turn around behind you and see all the wheat going into the clean grain tank, and you think, how does all that work?
Yeah.
And so there's lots of fun memories. So did your mom ever drag you out of the cab of that Steiger tractor crying and screaming and bellowing?
Yeah, many times. It would raise a fuss. I just then, I remember her bringing lunch to my dad, and then I'd always get to ride around. Well, the round turned into the rest of the day, but if it didn't, I was a pretty upset young man. Yes.
How much sleeping did you do on that bench?
A lot of them. I remember my dad would give me the earphones or the ear protection device, whatever you call them, he put on my head because they weren't the quietest tractor back in the day, and I remember if I leaned just right, they would buzz and it would just put me to sleep against the steel vibration of the tractor. Stupid little memories like that.
It is a great memory. So in your early 20s, what did agriculture bring to you?
Well, in my early 20s, I was custom harvesting a lot. When I got out of college, I bought a combine and ran a harvesting crew for 5-6 years on my own. So I was chasing the wheat harvest from Oklahoma to North Dakota, and I've kind of been involved with that ever since. Even when I was selling equipment, I've always owned a combine or leased a combine or did some sort of harvesting on the side. So that became quite my interest as I was selling equipment. So I started selling equipment on retail at 30 years old. So my early 20s, I'm probably one of the few kids from West Central Minnesota, right in the middle of lakes area, that's never water skied. I grew up in the middle of a wheat field, so I've never been on skis behind a boat. And in this part of the country, that's a little weird.
Do you fish?
No, not really. I try to, but I've always seemed to have something else to do in my mind. I have a family that fishes, and I enjoy fishing, but I just don't take the time to do it.
That you and I are a lot alike in a lot of ways. I can remember my dad, we'd go motorcycling or something in the mountains on a Saturday afternoon, but I never grew up on a set of water skis either. I never grew up in a boat. Our work and our enjoyment simply came from the farm.
Yeah.
And working.
Yeah. Yeah. Given the choice as a youth, I'd have rather spent in a tractor than on a lake, I guess. And that's why maybe that goes back to what we were talking about, passion. And when you like something, that's what you'd rather do.
Yep. That's exactly right. Well, Troy, we're coming down to the end of our first segment of the Legacy of Agriculture, our first episode in 2025. And I appreciate you being on board with us, folks. We've got a brand new list of land and machinery auctions that are coming at Pfeifers.com for a complete listing of all of those items that we're going to be selling in the spring of 2025. You'll want to go to our website at Pfeifers.com. That's Pifers.com. or you can simply give us a call at 605-836-2277. We'll be more than happy to go over the auctions that we've got in the spring of 2025, and we'll be right back.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction Realty and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffer's.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Folks, this is Chris Bear, your host of the Legacies of Agriculture. I've got Troy Johnsrud from the Elbow Lake, Minnesota, Fergus Falls area that has joined the Pfeiffer's team and is going to be working right alongside of us. Now, Troy, you talked a little bit about, in segment one, you were talking a little bit about your upbringing and what's your favorite piece of equipment?
Well, it's pretty easy. I got two, if I can name two. But my favorite piece of equipment is a Steiger 4-wheel drive tractor and probably a large combine. Those always had my biggest interests.
You know, I was watching some segments on the history of Steiger, and I'm actually going to do an LOA Legacy of Agriculture on Steiger and the history of Steiger one of these first days. It was interesting how that company got started by the Steiger family.
Yeah, I can wholeheartedly attribute, other than my father or my family's involvement in agriculture too, but the Steiger tractor is really what drove my interest. Growing up in Elbow Lake was the home of Christensen's Incorporated at the time, was a Steiger dealership, and one of the first, if not the first, Steiger dealerships. And just driving by their store every day with the tractor sitting outside, I would always it was always something special to me watching and looking at them. So it was a big part of the community here in Elbow Lake, and still to this day I have a soft spot in my heart for those tractors.
And that's exactly right. And now that you've kind of sparked my memory, is that the Steiger family, when they started building those Steiger tractors and they wanted to sell them to the public, the Christensens was a very important part of their growth many, many years ago in the early 50s and 60s, was the relationship that they had with the Christensen family.
Yeah, that's correct. I know them all very well, and they kind of stamped the corner there in Elbow Lake as the Steiger dealership, and the tractors were always there, so looked at them every day.
The interesting thing about the history of Steiger, and I don't want to get off into the weeds too far, but the interesting thing about the Steiger tractor is the majority of the components. The Steiger tractor was substantially more expensive than most of the other tractors. But the reason why the Steiger tractor was more expensive was simply because they were using industrial components to put those tractors together. They were using actually Euclid construction equipment components. You had Rockwell rear ends, and you had Eaton Fuller transmissions, and you had, in the early years, Detroit diesel engines in them, and they built a tractor around those really good, almost indestructible components.
Yeah, kind of indicates the resourcefulness of the brothers up there in Thief River Falls when they built them, how they sourced those parts and did what they had to do to make it work. Maybe, there was other people doing it too, perhaps, but in this area, that was pretty ahead of its time.
Very, very interesting. So tell me a little bit about how you came into the machinery side and how you continued to farm. Tell me a little bit about farming in central Minnesota and western central Minnesota.
Sure. Well, as a young person, it was a lot of small grains, wheat. I remember a time when there was a lot of sunflowers. In my particular area, there was corn, but it wasn't like it is now. There was more small grains. And then as we progressed through the 80s, this corn and the soybeans just took off. Things kind of changed that way. The land values drove it. The sugar beets came into play in the early 70s. I lived just on the edge the east side of the Red River Valley, 20 miles. So very involved with the Red River Valley where the sugar beets became so prominent. And of course, things have changed. The livestock in my area has kind of disappeared. Now there's some large dairies coming back, but the most part, the livestock production is not in my area. But the large corn and soybean farms have really stapled the area. With that happening, the increase size of the horsepower, the combines, the tractors, came with it. And we've seen farms grow. We've seen technology just go crazy up here. So, in my lifetime, it's really changed, and it's going to change a lot coming up. So we see it here up in the western side of Minnesota, and I'm not, this is the area I know, so that's what I'm speaking of. But the technology and the advancement is going crazy right now. It's leading edge everywhere. It's fun to see.
You talked about the technology. When did you really notice in agriculture that technology was taking over tradition? What I would call tradition, the old mechanical tractor, where everything was mechanical, to now the technology is just crazy in farm equipment.
Did you ask when did I see that?
Yes. When did you see technology starting to take over?
Well, I remember when we first learned that you might be able to use satellites to map your yield in the early to mid 90s, and started thinking, well, that's really crazy, and then pretty soon the auto steer came. In the late 90s, you started to see more and more. And what's crazy is how fast that went from an idea to you got to have it. So the late 90s, early 2000s is where when I seen the auto steer, anything with auto guidance take off, from anything from a satellite light bar to the full integrated auto steer. But now it's moved beyond that so far in the precise, the precision planning equipment, everything that's going, the See and Spray with John Deere, the technology going into everything. And now the autonomy, the automation, the driverless tractors that are, they're just a reach away. We're going to be seeing that. It's already there, but we're going to see the same takeover in the same way that we've seen the auto steer takeover. And it's anybody's bet how fast it comes, but I think it's faster than we think.
Do you think that there's going to come a time in the next 10 years where you will never see a operator in the seat of a tractor or a combine?
I would say that we'll still see it, but it'll be such a low percentage. I would think your top producers, your big progressive farms are going to run that way. Yes. I think you're always going to have somebody that enjoys driving a tractor, that it'll happen, or it won't be 100%. And we still have the people that run the aged machinery that are going to stay that way. There's going to be a market for that, but I think it's going to be a big takeover. Probably the same percentage of people not running auto steer now.
We did a legacy of agriculture here last fall on the autonomous feed truck, and that they're getting very, very close now to having a completely autonomous feed truck where there's actually no cab on the truck at all. And during the podcast, I had learned that the most expensive part of the truck, when you manufactured the truck, the most expensive part of that truck was building the cab and all the safety features for the driver. And now with that going away, I don't think it'll necessarily decrease the cost of putting a truck together, or I guess you could say the power unit together, but it definitely changes the face of how cattle will be fed and how feeding will be managed. And so when you put that same line of thinking together and put that piece of equipment out in the field, it completely changes how you're going to do, a guy who's going to do farming. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And, from a guy who's not around feedlots, it's fun to learn about that, because it makes sense. I imagine that's going to happen probably at a faster rate than anything, especially if you've got a feed truck or something that kind of runs a direct route continuously. I can see where that's going to obviously take over.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Folks, we're coming down to the end of our second segment of the Legacy of Agriculture. Troy Johnsrud is my guest today, broadcasting from Elbow Lake and Fergus Falls, Minnesota area. We appreciate Troy for taking time out of his busy day for a complete listing of all of the auctions that we've got coming in the spring of 2025. If you want to visit our website, at pifers.com, or simply give us a call at our office, 605-836-2277. Nobody does it better.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pifers Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pifers offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifers. Nobody does it better.
Folks, this is Chris Berry, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. We're back in our third segment of the Legacy of Agriculture, our first broadcast for 2025. Troy Johnsrud, who has just recently joined the Pifers team, is my first guest in 2025. I wanted everybody to get to know Troy a little bit better. And he has an extremely large amount of experience in the agricultural world. And you said we started talking in the second segment about the autonomous tractor, the autonomy of the equipment that's coming in agriculture now. Troy, explain that just a little bit more. For those that may not know agriculture really well or the history, explain what you mean by autonomous equipment.
Well, basically, I don't know the direct definition, but autonomy is an autonomous tractor is a driverless tractor. So we're talking about the reduction in manpower or the need for have somebody sitting in the tractor. It's a tractor, combine, or farm equipment, feed truck, as we mentioned before, that will run without a driver in it and run strictly off automation and a computer. And it's coming like an avalanche, and it's really impressive stuff.
I noticed that for the last several years, that Case International has been taunting, and you see quite a bit now on social media platforms and YouTube, completely cabless tractor. But yesterday or last night, I was doing some research at home, and I was watching a YouTube clip, and John Deere, who was sponsoring Farm Journal, and I was halfway looking at my computer, and I was halfway looking at the TV screen, and I looked up, and there's a tractor going through the field with a cab on it and no driver on the inside. And it was actually a little bit startling. So tell me what your opinion is about that, and what direction, good, bad, or indifferent, Troy.
Well, in my conservative nature, I don't like it, but I like it in terms of progress. It's a I don't know if you've seen the videos, or in the recent months, we had some, the port workers, the dock workers on strike, and not to veer from the agriculture sector. But if anybody's seen the videos of the autonomous trucks unloading container ships, it's absolutely incredible. When you've got that kind of business, that kind of commerce going on, and that kind of activity going on in a small physical area, the logistics are crazy, and the results are unbelievable. And nobody wants to see an American worker or any worker lose a job, and that's the part I don't like. But when you see what they can do, I have not done this, but I've had friends go, like in Phoenix, Arizona, for example. They have the autonomous taxis, the driverless taxis, and I guess they're just incredible. They don't make mistakes. They're safe, they're efficient, they're dependable. We don't want to think a computer is better than a person, but the results are impressive. So, when a tractor goes to field and it has enough data to know the field boundaries, the obstacles, the water intakes, anything that it needs to go around, and can calculate the distance, the turn radiuses, and all the things needed to pull an implement around an obstacle without it hitting it, the computer is better than a human. And I think we're going to see that. Now, is it going to eliminate job? No, you still need somebody to run and operate that. It's just going to take a different skill set. And as at my age, it seems overwhelming and it seems like something that shouldn't happen, but we're sure it will happen.
Well, you and we were born old school where you walk up to a combine and everything on that combine was mechanical. The idea of having micro switches and computers and some of these, it's crazy how many computer chips and boards are in these combines and in farm equipment now just to run them with a driver in. Um, it is a little bit unsettling to see a piece of equipment going through the field with a driver, it being driverless, the power unit being driverless. But in the same token, one of the reasons why the United States and it is the leader in the world in production is because we're developing all of this and they do it on the heels of efficiency and corn, with corn and soybeans and the technology really is driving the efficiencies so that we can grow more and more food at a lower cost. And you cannot turn your back on the technology, but technology has to be used appropriately. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes.
And
Yep.
I think that that's kind of what you're digging at is that we have to have that. Not that we ever want to take the human out of it, but take a look. I grew up on an irrigated farm. And when the center pivot came out, I mean, everything was moved with hand lines or wheel lines, and it was all mechanical. When the pivot came along and they developed the swing spanner, what we coined as the corner catcher, it took out a lot of that manual labor and made the farms a lot more efficient. And I can remember my dad bought, I don't know, 6 or 7 new pivots one year simply because he couldn't get the workers to come in and do the work anymore. And we became more efficient because we could farm a lot more acres with a lot less manpower. But now the mechanization has completely changed to where this autonomous is becoming a big deal.
And history tends to repeat itself a little bit, and we can go back, I don't know the exact, 150 years, but when we went from horses to a steam tractor, there was people that didn't want the change, that had every reason why a mechanical tractor wasn't as good as a horse. And we're kind of in the same situation again, and it goes over and over again. The next leap of technology is always a little apprehensive at first, and it's easy to not want per se, but in the end, it doesn't stop. The progress keeps going.
Yep. I did some research. I did some research on Henry Ford, and one of the reasons why Henry Ford got in and started building the Fordson tractor was simply because he believed that the human being was being abused in the labor force, and the mechanization and just building a tractor and replacing the horses, like what you said, and replacing humans was actually more humane than having. And that was an interesting perspective that Henry Ford had. But anyways, we're coming down to the end of our third segment. We just got a few seconds left here. Appreciate our sponsor, Pifer Auction and Realty, for complete listing of all of the auctions that we've got in the spring of 2025. Go and visit our website at pifers.com or simply give us a call, 605-836-2277. Nobody does it better.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pifer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pifer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit pifers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pifer's. Nobody does it better.
Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Bear, your host of the Legacy of Agriculture. We're in our fourth and final segment of the Legacy of Agriculture, the first show that we have in 2025. And Troy Johnsrud, our newest and best member of the Pifer team, has joined us out of central Minnesota. Troy, thank you for joining us. You guys, and we've done several social media productions about the auction that you had in mid-December on a live auction. Pfeiffer's did a live auction on the farm that you were working on, and now you've joined us as a team member. Tell us about your experience of having a live auction.
Well, the first experience, it was fun to see again because it's been a while. There's been a couple in the area lately. There was a large one last summer that Pfeiffer's conducted up here by Breckenridge, Minnesota, and that was fun to see again too. But just the atmosphere of a live auction, live farm auction, farmers, myself included, in rural communities, it's always a bit of a social event too. But through the course of the auction, I got many compliments and the people commenting on the fun to be together for an auction again. It's just something that seems to have gone away through COVID and at times maybe the progress we're talking about, but the involvement in the excitement of the bidding in many cases brought buyers. And if you're looking to sell, I think it would be almost a must for me because just to see, the excitement going on a piece of equipment that you don't get over the internet. And of course, the internet bidding helps enhance it, but just the atmosphere of the excitement was really fun to see again.
In agriculture, it's always bushels in the bin at the end of the year, right? We talk about the excitement. We talk about the growing up on farms. We talk about the history of farms. And at the end of the day, it's bushels in the bin for a farmer. But in the auction industry, it's about dollars in our seller's pocket. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about is that we are now living 15, 18 years ago when the online auction started. And I remember that very, very well, thinking as an auctioneer and being in the auction industry all of my career that it's crazy to get away from the live auctions, and the online would never completely take over the auction industry. But as we've now cycled through what I call the wedding and the honeymoon of the online auctions, no question the technology serves its purpose. But there's something that is, in my opinion, that's happening out there is that people still want the live auction. Would you agree with that?
I do, and after last month's sale, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Another thing you can add to the online auction is the saturation of it. I mean, you can't possibly watch them all. It's become so easy that everybody's doing it, and it kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. Live auction is something the community looks forward to, waits for, participates in, makes it a little more special. We've seen that last month.
So Kevin Pfeiffer, as one of the auctioneers, has probably sold more live land auctions than anybody that I know in my 30-plus year career. You had Andy Murdoch and Jeff Polk, who were two of the best auctioneers in the industry. How do you think that they changed the face of the auction and the dollars on the bottom line for your previous employer?
Well, there's several items that sold in that auction that did very well and I feel did better because of the live auction, just due to the excitement and the competitive spirit of the buyers that comes out in that situation. A lot of times you'd think something would stall out and it would start going, and those guys up in the booth made it happen. They were very good. They're very good auctioneers, as you stated. And you could just see that sometimes we don't want to lose. You know what I mean? If you're bidding on something and it's either it's on the internet or the guy across the aisle or something, you kind of you decide you want it. Maybe you go over your budget. We're not encouraging anybody to overspend, but the point is, for the seller it does very well because it brings out the best price, because people will get in that spirit of the auction and they'll there's several items on that sale I can definitely agree that brought more money because of the live sale.
I know as bidders and buyers are buying along and on an online auction, you can really get lost in the auction itself. But when you have that live auctioneer that's up there and say, hey guys, we're selling this 535 quad track, and remember, it's got a PTO and a 3-point hitch on it. That's $30,000 worth of options that you're missing, and all of a sudden the bidding picks up and starts again. Did you see a lot of that happening?
Yes, we did. We've seen it several times where it slowed down and a reminder of the features, a review of the equipment, and the presentation by the auctioneers, and kept it going and brought. And another great thing about the live auction, the equipment was right there so they can see it. We're all going to tend to be a little more reserved on a piece of equipment that we can't walk around and kick the tires and sit in the seat and hear run. But when you see what you're bidding and it's quality equipment, it's going to bring out the best.
You're 100% right on that, Troy. And the nice thing is, not only did you have the live portion, but the technology side of it, the online bidding that was taking place the week before, and then the simulcast bidding that was taking place during the auction allowed all of the conveniences of technology to play its part, but the technology did not replace the live auctioneer. And the technology did not create the atmosphere. It was the auctioneers that created the atmosphere, and how the auction was conducted to create the momentum to go out and get more money for the items that were being sold. Would you agree with that, Troy?
100% I agree. It was noticeable. It was very visible that day. And we've all been to live auctions, and we can name many that happened. And those three auctioneers you mentioned absolutely did a bang up job, and they were just fun to listen to and fun to watch and fun to see the crowd involvement in it. Absolutely. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've never seen that kind of excitement on an online auction. Of course you can't see it, but you know what I mean? The spirit of it was incredible.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I didn't get to attend the auction. I had a full schedule that whole week, but I was able to log in and watch part of that auction. And you just sitting here in my office, watching it on the computer, the little bit that I did, I could feel the momentum and the spirit of that auction. And there was a feeling there in that auction that I haven't felt at an auction other than a live auction for a long, long time. And it was a great experience. And it wasn't easy equipment to sell either. But Troy, we're completely out of time. I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us on the Legacy of Agriculture. I'm excited to come up and see you next week. You're going to take off to Frisco, Texas to watch NDSU play football. And
Yes,
but you're going to be back, and we're going to get together next week, and we're going to put a great plan together. Troy, thank you for joining me on the Legacy of Agriculture. Folks, this is Chris Bear finishing up the fourth and final segment for complete listing of all of the auctions that we've got in the spring of 2025. You want to go to our website at pifers.com, or simply give us a call, 605-836-2277. Nobody does it better.
In it here now, I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna been on here now, who bid $500,000 bid.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bear, sponsored by Pifers Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pifers at 605-836-2277.